All right, I'd like to call the City Council and Local Contract Review Board meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please take roll.
Councillor Newton.
Here.
Councillor Lube. Here. Councillor Anderson.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, staff or council, do we have any non-agenda items?
Staff have none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Citizen communication, do we have any follow-up to previous citizen communication?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. First on the agenda, or next on the agenda, would be an update from Police Chief McAlpine.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Chief McAlpine for your February dashboard. Sorry, it's a little bit late, but we'll get right to it. You can see above there's two things I'd like to highlight for you regarding business burglaries and UUMVs, which again is basically your vehicle thefts. On the burglary businesses, there's a couple of patterns that we've noticed, some on construction sites, also in the Tigard Plaza, and then some of our convenience stores / gas stations. And at the risk of being somewhat cryptic, I will just say that all of it is a work in progress, and we have promising leads that we hope to have a resolution soon. But just want to acknowledge, even though it doesn't indicate that it's an uptick from February of last year, there's still activity going on that I want to draw your attention to. The other one is vehicle thefts. I've told you repeatedly that our vehicle thefts have been going up. In this particular month, we had 5 Honda CRVs stolen. And so that again is a type of car, is a pattern, and taking a look at that. Through our crime analysis, she was able to identify some people who are kind of drawn to those type of vehicles. And about the same time, Beaverton PD was able to execute a search warrant in Beaverton to arrest our suspects. And there were about 6 CRVs that were recovered in that location. So if they stay incarcerated or confined for any length of time, we should get a reprieve from at least that activity. The other one I draw attention to, again, you've heard me talk about what is our workload. And again, this is a picture of showing in February that we still remain 63% of our calls are societal type. And again, on your front sheet, we indicate what societal types are, but that is your drug offenses, disorderly conduct, trespass offenses, liquor, all of those things. And again, that is our mental health and drug or intoxicated people that are in crisis at the time. And you can see it is taking its toll on our workload. So again, just want to keep that on your forefront of your mind. And again, here's just the graph you're familiar with seeing, and it shows that the last 3 months we were definitely upticking when it comes to behavioral health calls. So again, if an officer believes that a person at the time of contact is exhibiting any type of crisis, exhibiting any mental illness, they are not diagnosing, but they're just noting it, that this required some attention. Doesn't mean that it resulted in arrest. It could be that we had to take time to get them voluntarily to get some help that they need, which then again takes from an hour to 2 hours of us coming out of service. So again, those are the main things. The other thing, I would be remiss if I did not at least remind you too that in our staffing, we do have 6 police officer vacancies. And again, that's 6 from the 4 positions we eliminated. So we are on a tight string as far as our responses and the workload that we're doing. In patrol right now, we have 33 assigned and 30 available. Some of the vacancies we're holding is in the Tri-Med area. So again, trying to have the least impact on patrol, which is where our priority staffing is. And with that said, the other thing I would like to share with all of you is that, as you're aware, we were going through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance application process, having 103 standards reviewed. We've had all our files reviewed. They have conducted their on-site, and we will wait and hear in April to see if we will be awarded accreditation status, and that'll be done at the OACP conference. So I hope to come back maybe next month to announce to you that we are accredited. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Anybody? Counselor Newton?
It's really more of a comment. I had the privilege of doing a ride-along with one of our officers last Monday night, and to follow up on what you said, there was, there weren't a lot of calls that night, but I would note that the calls that we had were of the societal nature and very time-consuming.
Yes.
So, yeah, it wasn't like just pulling over for a traffic stop. There were two in particular that were, they took an hour and a half. So, yeah, and the officer, I was really impressed with her ability to read the situation and try to figure out how to help this individual. The individual is a little combative, so, it was good for me as a counselor to see what the kinds of things that they're dealing with. So, again, I appreciate being able to do that, so thanks.
Well, I appreciate you
Thank
taking the time to spend some time with us, so thank you for that.
So, Chief, I wanted to just ask if you're, the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, which is a group that includes me, is pushing quite hard on legislation to try to address the uptick in auto theft, which is really in part due to a court ruling a couple of years ago that was not very favorable for prosecuting those. I'm certain you're aware of all that. The rest of the public may not be quite as familiar, but I wondered if you were tracking what's happening in the Oregon House right now and the Oregon Senate on that legislation, and I don't know if you're considering offering any testimony, but given the data, you may want to consider doing so.
No, I appreciate that. No, I have not offered to go and lend my voice to that. So it's definitely something for me to consider. I do know that our OACP representatives do monitor that and usually send.
Are pushing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, there are several House bills out there worth keeping a close eye on. So that is one of them.
We're trying. You have the mayor's support, at least in the Portland metro area. I can tell you that. It's one of that and QBS, our selection process for certain. Those are our two top priorities. So we continue to push them, and
I thank you for your support. Thank you for that.
any other questions or comments for the chief? Councilor Lube?
I just wanted to say I also went on a ride-along in the last couple of weeks, and your staff was incredibly gracious with their time and informative and really making sure that I understood what was going on and the challenges of the job that they face. So please take back my thank yous for their time and their experience, and I look forward to doing it again to get a deeper understanding.
Yeah. Thank you again for both being new counselors and taking the time to see a little bit of what we do. So I do appreciate that, and I will certainly be happy to give them the feedback. And I know I will always say anytime, your time is valuable and you have a lot to do, but anytime that you can have even a half a shift, you want to come, we can make that happen pretty quick. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is the Tigard Area Chamber of Commerce CEO, Debbie Mulhan.
Microphone. Since the last time I was in.
We do. Do you like it?
Yeah, I do. It's very petite and very high-tech looking. So lots going on in the chamber. Earlier this month, we had Leadership Tigard. So it's a monthly program, community leadership program, and it was Nonprofits and Boards Day. So they got exposed to a bunch of different speakers that talked about how nonprofits operate, the different types of nonprofits, what boards do, the role of a board. They got to kind of do some speed dating with about 10 of our local nonprofits that are looking to recruit either board members or volunteers, so the class got to participate with those. And they went and toured the real life exhibit at Medical Teams International, which is very impactful. If you've never had a chance to do that, I would highly recommend it. So anyway, the class is almost done. They have April and May are their next 2 months, and then they'll be graduating, and then we'll be recruiting for next year's class, but that is going very well. Our Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee is in full swing since the legislature is also in full swing. And one of the things we did this last week was we actually sent a letter on behalf of our chamber members with regard to a paid family leave bill that's going through which would be very, very costly for business across the board, whether you're 1 employee or 1,000 employees. So we provided feedback from the business community on that. We've had a lot of new businesses join the chamber in the last couple months, a total of 19 between January and February. So we're excited about that. We're growing. Per usual, we have networking on Thursday mornings weekly, and it moves around to different locations. We will actually be doing ribbon cutting for one of the downtown core businesses, Studio 7, which is in Atwell's rentable space underneath the front section that faces Burnham, and that'll be on Thursday. I would encourage you to save the date for Shining Stars, which is the Community Awards Gala. It'll be Friday, May 3rd. I think some of you have already registered. All the award winners and scholarship recipients have been selected, and they've been notified, and now we're getting ready to do the social media and the press release rollout, so I can't tell you anything yet, but it will be hitting Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so follow our social feeds. Update for the Tigard Farmers Market. It will be opening Sunday, May 5th, so that is not. We encourage the community to come out. We're still signing up vendors. If you're a nonprofit or some other community organization, you can sign up for a Sunday to be in the community booth to connect with the 600 to 800 patrons that come through. Or if you're a musician, you can perform music at the market. So there's a lot of different ways to participate, as well as come and shop the market and support our vendors. I'm gonna put on my Tigard Downtown Alliance hat now and save the date for Art Walk, which starts May 31st through June 2nd. So it's 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we hired a new Art Walk coordinator. Her name is Kelly Mark. She's doing a great job. And we just launched a new website for Explore Downtown Tigard. We have some content that we do need to update, but it's much more mobile responsive, really, I think, puts a much better face on our downtown core. So we're excited about that. And that's kind of it.
All right. Any questions? City Manager Wine?
Can I add to the report from our chamber CEO? I think the council has been looking for dates to be hosting Good Morning Tigard, and I think we've settled on one.
Yes, we did.
It's May 30th. So
May 30th.
another save the date for your calendars.
So save the date. Yeah, that's a ways out, but we are looking forward to that. I think it'll be great for Chamber to connect with council. I don't think council
We're
itself has
excited to
actually
host.
hosted Good Morning Tigard. So this is the first in my 9 years being Chamber CEO. So very excited about that.
Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions or comments? Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate it. All right, next item on the agenda is citizen communication. I have the sign-up sheet. I'm going to ask you to keep your comments to 2 minutes. And our first item on the agenda, or the first individual signed up to speak is Jerry Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, please come on up. The microphone is on. Please state your name and address for the record, and then try to keep your comments to 2 minutes.
And then talk, okay. Jerry Hoffman, 10950 Southwest 89th, Tigard, Oregon. And I'm here in regards to I think it's the Thornwoods project that is up at the end of my street. My house sits lowest on the block from any house, any direction. And it is on the corner of Thorn and 89th. My concern is, I've lived there for 40 years, and I'm always dealing with water problems. And water runs downhill, and it runs to me. And I've dealt with that for all these years, and actually pretty well. On this situation, I don't know if enough has been done or checked. I looked at some notes from a meeting that took place previously, where some of the counselors said no, it hasn't been addressed well enough to mitigate the water problems from building new homes. They have put in a ditch along the side and it flows down. I don't know if there's a retention thing at where the thing is being built, and if there is, how does it get to that pipe that runs down the road? And then it runs under the road, and it's about a 15-inch pipe, and it dead ends right smack into another ditch, and then it has to go somewhere. So it doesn't go very far. It gets it off the property that it runs from, but it runs right to me. And that's my main concern, is that be addressed a little better than I've seen the notes, where 2 or 3 of the commissioners said, yes, it has not been addressed. Steve White, I don't know if he's the builder, but even admitted that he couldn't mitigate all the water. And I'm not asking him to do that, but also another commissioner says, well, I understand the problem, but I don't see that it's his problem to take care of water for everybody in the neighborhood. It is if it exacerbates the problem that's already there. And so I guess I'm asking, from what I've heard, I would like to know if that can be reopened or if it can be given more consideration. I haven't seen these plans. I probably don't know how to read them exactly, but I want to know that there's a way to stop the water from just running onto the road, and if it catches over the crest of the road, it's going to run right into my property, right into other people's driveways. And I don't think that's right. And there's another piece of property just in between, I think John's house and another one on the corner, I think has also already been, more houses going in there, or at least they've talked about it. It's in the air, and it's perfect for that. So that will even make it even worse. So my problem is water.
Have you had any conversations or with any city staff about your concerns? Would it be helpful to have a city staff member outreach to you and follow up to understand?
Oh, sure. I'd like to just know that it's going to not make the problem worse.
So City Manager Wine, who in the we got a lot of staff in the room. Who would be the most appropriate to follow up with Mr. Hoffman?
Well, I guess I'll say 2 things.
Sure.
Possibly, our engineering staff would be able to take a look at the situation and outreach to you. I was able to check in with our engineering staff about the required development, or the conditions of approval related to the development. And as Mr. Hoffman relates, there was a new public storm system that was installed on Thorn Street that was meant to convey the runoff from the development. There was an existing ditch along Thorn Street that was regraded, and the existing culvert that crossed 89th was replaced with the larger pipe that you referenced. And so that development was required to provide those water quality facilities, and the aim there was to be able to mitigate the drainage and stormwater runoff and also treat the runoff from the development. So
which is our requirement. I mean, that's our requirement.
Right. I'm only mentioning the requirement because to the question about whether it can be reopened, if the subdivision has been built and the development conditions have been met, then probably reopening it is not, from that perspective, is not an option. But if the drainage situation or the runoff situation is worse, we can look into it. I'm just not, there's going to be a lot that will be possible to be done.
And there's been, I would.
Well, I would invite any of you just to drive down on a rainy day to my house, stand there on the corner and watch the water. And so where the water has been falling onto the ground and it gets saturated into the ground, that's great. But I would like to, at least if nothing else, have somebody show me that there is something that's been done. You said it has, but I want to see that retention thing, and how does that water then get into that ditch? And then when it gets it off of that property and gets it all the way down to my corner, and then like I said, here's a wall of another ditch, and it just dead ends into it like 1 foot away. So it's going to be going through there at warp 10,
I can ask out to you to explain what's happening there. I think the purpose of the public storm system that was installed was to both slow the runoff and to treat it and carry it away. So I think if we have your contact information from the sign-in sheet, I can ask our staff to reach out to you.
And that's my main concern.
Okay.
I've had enough water over 40 years of being there, but if there's gonna be more going in, then what do we do with that? I mean, if there's more houses going in there. If we
Thank you.
address
If
it
there's-
at that moment.
Okay.
Appreciate your testimony tonight, Mr.
Okay.
Hoffman. Staff will follow up. All right, next individual signed up, John Mentasana. Name and address for the record, please.
John Mentasana, 8835 Southwest Thorn Street, Tigard, Oregon, 97223. And I guess, so I've given citizen communication on safety concerns of the road on my property line with no room for sidewalk, blind spots, and then this is all in regards to the Thornwood Meadows development. And now in addition to the concerns about the water detention and how it, in the commissioning meeting on February 27th, that they say that full water detention was not achieved by the stuff that has been done with the ditch and that the situation as it sits right now, the water overflow will be worse to not only Jerry, and he's going to take the biggest hit, but the other neighbors as well. So what has been done is it states in that meeting that it's not being achieved. So I guess my question is you guys rescheduled the study meeting on these concerns, or you've stated that it's going to be determined for when that's rescheduled. But I guess my question is when will that be talked about for rescheduling that study session? And can that be talked about today, about rescheduling that study session on the citizen communication?
Well, I've stated a couple times we've provided in my estimation, a pretty robust review and response. I've read a statement publicly in response to the things that you've raised. The water detention questions, I think, are the only new item that I've heard, and I think the city manager's prepared to respond and actually has provided that response. But I have not indicated that we're going to put something on an agenda for a discussion further. You've asked for that, and I've said no, and I'm going to continue to say no because there's no rationale to do so. But if there's more water questions that you have factual questions like your neighbor, we can certainly respond to those. But we don't have a legal rationale to require a developer to do something different after a project is conditioned and built. That's not how Oregon land use law works.
I've been complaining from the start about the road right on my property line, and my son's almost been hit by a vehicle. And so I'm just confused on the position of the city council and how they find it to be appropriate to take that position of not pursuing that further. Can you help me understand?
Well, at the risk of reading the entire two-page statement that I read a couple weeks ago that responded to this, which I don't think is a great use of our time right now, we have heard your concerns. We've evaluated them. I'm going to summarize what I said before. And I have found, along with other members of the council, that we have done robust due diligence at both the staff and council level on the concerns that you've raised. The water question is one that has been raised more recently. And I think staff has evaluated that and will now be outreaching to your neighbor to answer some additional questions about it. Councilor Anderson, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So you said some of the commissioners said that there wasn't adequate space for the water to run off. That would probably be the Planning Commission and not us. So they're an advisory board to us. And so if they've rescheduled a meeting, that would be on their calendar. So you might want to check the Planning Commission, right? They do the land use and the developments.
Okay.
So my guess is that that's where the, Clean Water Services and all these people weigh in on the capacity for that water.
Can you speak to the, like, I guess, what it says about it hasn't been achieved?
I don't have any information that would, I don't have enough information to speak to your comment. Councilor Anderson just said, I'm not clear from your comments whether the commission comments you're referring to are planning commission comments that were made in the course of their decision, in which case, even in spite of making a comment that the water quality issues hadn't been achieved, if they still made a decision to approve and recommend the subdivision, then that would be part of their deliberations. But I don't know if that happened before the decision or since. So I would have to look into what the Planning Commission has on their docket, but I don't have any information that could speak to your comment.
Okay, so that comment about citizen communication, of rescheduling the study session, that's in regards to the Planning Commission? Or what is that in regards to?
To me, it sounds like the Planning Commission. It didn't come through us.
I mean, without knowing what you're looking at, I don't know what
It's
you're
on the
referencing.
agenda, highlighted in red.
What's
The
the agenda?
Citizen 2A Commission, or 2A has been removed and moved to.
I'm sorry. Yeah, can I clarify? On tonight's agenda during the study session, item 2A was a presentation from Metro Councilor Craig Dirksen, who canceled his presentation to the council on the study session tonight, and he was unable to come. So his presentation will be rescheduled to a future date, and that's what that note on tonight's agenda refers to.
Okay. So citizen communication tonight will be possibly moved to.
You are speaking right now on the agenda item called citizen communication, and there is one of those on every business meeting.
So I'm just saying, so it could go to the next meeting then, for the study session?
There will always be a citizen
There's always a
communication
space on the
element.
agenda for citizen communication.
Okay. I guess I'll be at that one next week.
This study session.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a regular business meeting, we talked about this, I think, a week ago. You don't want to necessarily, if you're wanting to speak at citizen communication, it needs to be a regular business meeting and not a workshop meeting. So
Yeah.
some of the meetings are workshops where we do not take public comment.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
The next individual signed up to speak is Jamie Stasny.
Good evening. Jamie Stasny, 17933 Northwest Evergreen Parkway, Beaverton 97006. Hi, I'm Mayor Snyder and councilors. I'm back tonight to talk with you about your goals again. Since we last met, we've been working pretty hard. We've submitted an application in partnership with your staff for a grant to Metro, and we've started meeting with staff to talk about the scope of the project for River Terrace South and West. So we're really excited and committed to this partnership. I wanted to come back in front of you tonight just to clarify one point within your goals that you're going to be considering this evening. The language has changed a bit in Goal 2, so just wanted to touch base on one of the points that's going to become really important in the coming weeks as we start to figure out the scope of this work. And the third bullet point talks about the costs. As you've made very clear in previous meetings, you would like the costs of this project to be borne by the developer or grants that, or the partners, and or grants that are obtained at the expense of private sector partners. Very clear on that. But one point that isn't clarified in that bullet is that these should be project-related costs, and that they should be reasonable, which I realize is subjective, but they need to be costs that are specifically related to the River Terrace planning project and not other projects. When we started having some conversations, I think we have a lot more conversations to go, and I'm really optimistic and looking forward to them. But it would be helpful to have some clarification that these should be reasonable costs and specifically related to the project. So I just wanted to ask for that clarification, whether it's just verbal or included in the goal language itself. I think it's an important item to address. So that is my request. And then finally, I just wanted to communicate to you that we, as I said, are very committed to this project. We're ready to get started. We would like to approach this in phases, just as the planning process will occur in phases. So I've talked to City Manager Wine and Kenny and Toby about that a little bit, but I just wanted to say that to council. It makes logical sense to break it up into chunks, so we're looking forward to doing that. We'll work through that with staff, but I just wanted to be upfront with you all that that's our plan on the approach. Are there any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
You.
All right, our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We are going to attempt to be, or try to be more transparent about what we're doing with the consent agenda, and our council's had some discussion about that. So I'm going to provide a little bit of information about the consent agenda, which is used for routine items such as approval of minutes, council meeting calendars, proclamations, appointments to boards and committees, and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements with partner agencies. Detailed information on each item is available on the city's website, in the packet for this meeting, and in a binder at the front of Town Hall. Approval may be enacted in one motion without separate discussions. Anyone on the council can request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Tonight, we are considering approving on the consent agenda City Council minutes from two different meetings, a contract award for agent of record services, contract award for right-of-way mowing services, contract award to buy a boom and bucket truck, contract award for sewer and stormline rehabilitation services, and a contract award for on-call utility business and rates planning services. Any questions or motion from the council?
I move for the adoption of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Item number 4 on the agenda is to consider a resolution granting exemption from property taxes under TMC 3.50 for nonprofit low-income properties. Mr. LaFrance and Ms. Lutz?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Toby LaFrance, Finance and Information Services Director. With me this evening is Liz Lutz, Executive Assistant in Finance. Before you this evening is a resolution to exempt property taxes on regulated low-income housing in the city of Tigard under Tigard Municipal Code. This is something that we do on an annual basis. We have the same properties that the city has granted the tax exemption to over the last couple of years before you this evening, and staff recommends approval of the resolution in front of you this evening, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Who has questions? Councillor Newton.
I don't have a question, just a comment. It was great reading the applications because when I worked here, you know, these are such great projects, and it's such a great thing that we do to allow people to live in these projects, for affordable housing. And so it was great to read the information. I appreciated it. It made me remember some of the great work that especially SEPA does to provide affordable housing for our community. So thanks.
Other comments or questions? Okay. Is there a staff recommendation?
Staff recommends approval of the resolution before you this evening.
All right.
I approve resolution number 19-09.
You move that, correct?
Yeah, move to approve.
Yeah. Just making sure.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 19-09. A resolution granting an exemption from property taxes under Tigard Municipal Code Section 3.50 for 5 nonprofit low-income housing projects owned and operated by Community Partners for Affordable Housing and Resident Resources, Oregon.
Any final discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, consider resolution of support for Metro Regional Travel Options Grant for safe routes to schools. Mr. Roth.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Dave Roth, Senior Transportation Planner at the City of Tigard. So before you tonight is a resolution that would authorize city staff to apply for a Metro Regional Transportation Options Grant to support and continue Tigard's successful Safe Routes to School program. The program supports a city staff person who implements all kinds of activities at local elementary and middle schools. Currently, the new grant would allow us to expand the program to high schools and expand to better partner with Tigard-Tualatin School District, including their transportation group, and to expand into busing as well as walking and bicycling to school.
That's your presentation? Okay, just make it, I don't want to interrupt you. Okay. Any council questions?
I have one.
Councilor Newton?
Yeah, David, could you, on the information summary, it talks about $60,000 in the form of in-kind staff time. Is that related to the Safe Routes to School coordinator, or is that other staff?
Yeah, let me give a little detail on the actual cost breakdown here. So the total program cost that would cover 3 years of program is $315,000, and that includes $60,000 in in-kind match, and that's consistent with how the program's been run over the last several years. And what it essentially breaks down to is $20,000 per year or $5,000 per quarter, and that's staff time that's essentially donated across the city organization. So we have approximately 25 city staff that help out with the program. 75,000 of the 315 is coming from Washington County's MISDIP Opportunity Fund, and then the actual RTO grant is in the amount of $180,000. Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion or other questions?
I move to approve resolution number 19-10.
I second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 19-10, a resolution authorizing a regional travel options grant to continue Tigard's Safe Routes to School.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And it looks like you're staying up here for item number 6, which is consideration of an IGA with Washington County to accept MSTIP opportunity funds, which you just talked about, to support safe routes to schools.
Yeah, so before you is a request to sign an intergovernmental agreement with Washington County to accept a $40,000 contribution to support the current Safe Routes to School program. So the City of Tigard went to Washington County Coordinating Committee back in 2016 when we applied for our last Regional Transportation Options Grant, and the Coordinating Committee was kind enough to give us $40,000 to support our local match requirements, and now it's time to collect the money. So we have an IGA that needs to be signed by the mayor and then delivered to Washington County.
Okay, is there a motion for approval?
I move for approval of the IGA with Washington County as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate all your hard work on that program. It makes a big difference in our community, so thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, number 7. Consider adoption of city council goals for 2019 to 2021. City Manager Wine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before you tonight, I'm going to do a bare minimum of setup for this because you've been there for the whole thing. Back on February 12th, you held your goal-setting session, and these are the council's priorities for your attention and action during the 2-year period that you'll serve together between 2019 and 2021. During that facilitated discussion, you came up with 5 goal areas that included focusing on the city's continued financial stability and sustainability, investing and connecting in key areas of the city to promote economic growth and community vitality, ensuring that Tigard grows in a smart and inclusive manner, enhancing two-way communication to understand community priorities, and enhancing walkability and pedestrian connectivity. So through the last 2 sessions that you've had, including one on, I mentioned February 12th, and then also on March 5th, staff have offered you refined language about the strategic priorities under those goals, and we have a new draft for your consideration tonight and would recommend your discussion and adoption of the goals.
Okay, do we have further discussion?
I was just going to ask a follow-up from the citizen communication we had. Do we feel that the language in there is adequate to cover what was mentioned as far as reasonable and specific costs for the project and in phases? Does that language feel like we handled that part, or does that need to be amended to?
I think from a staff perspective, we're amenable to the language. I think Ms. Stasny related that we have just begun conversations about what the elements of the project entail and what we haven't really had a conversation about what kinds of staff support constitute a reasonable or what is actually project related. What we have offered from a staff perspective is that if we are to meet the council goal to not have the urban growth boundary expansion planning supplant or disrupt existing work, we will need to backfill our existing staff to have the capacity to do the project. But we're just in beginning discussions about what that will look like. So, I mean, I'm not averse to the idea of including the words reasonable and project related, but I think that's to be determined.
Okay.
Those are all subjective as well, which may not help clarify. If someone's seeking clarification, that's not potentially helpful. Councilor Newton?
I think if you look at it in total, it seems pretty clear to me, especially since words like reasonable and things like that are kind of hard to define. But I understood on the bullet where we talk about all direct, indirect, and overhead costs necessary to make South River Terrace development ready. That sounds pretty specific to me, that it would be related to making that development ready. So.
Okay.
Other council have any further input on that point?
I would agree with Councilor Newton. I think, the direct, indirect, and overhead costs are specific. And I don't see that we would need to add the reasonable and specifically related to the project, because I believe that's in the verbiage that's already on that bullet point.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson, anything on that point?
No, I think the point that Ms. Stasny broke, she just didn't want any overreach in any other projects, so I will give her a verbal right
Commitment
now.
to that?
Yes,
Yeah, I
exactly.
understand.
And break it down phases, it sounds like.
So that City Manager Wine, you didn't comment on the phasing part. Do you have a staff perspective to add on that, or?
I don't think I have anything to offer in that respect. I think we've just begun discussions about what those phases might look like. From a staff perspective, learning what we have learned from River Terrace and also from participating in King City's process. I understand the concept of breaking the project into phases. I think we can do that. We haven't come to any understanding about what the phases may look like, so that is certainly possible also.
Okay, let's go to more broad questions or comments about the rest of the goals. Do we have any others from anyone or a motion?
Mr. Mayor, real quick.
Councilor Newton?
Under Goal 1, Strategy 1.1, I just wanted to give the council a heads up that I'm really excited about working with the community for citizen engagement on Strategy 1.1 and hoping that we can have some good discussions with the council once we've had an opportunity to meet with that group in April. And I think Ms. Robinson's in the audience. I think that we're planning to bring something back to council in the next month or so that would reflect that goal. So just giving you a heads up, really excited.
Things are moving.
They are.
Goals not even approved, and you've got strategies in motion. All right. So any other feedback or suggestions or a motion? I feel like these have been vetted pretty robustly. In the last week or two, I've actually gotten and requested feedback from a variety of community leaders, including folks that have served on council in the past, to sort of get their thoughts and perspective, and I appreciate them providing that input. And I got pretty positive feedback from that, so that makes me feel more confident that we have hopefully continued to set the city on the right future path. So, is there a motion?
I move for the approval of the 2019 to 2021 council goals as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any final discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, council goals are finalized. This is a big moment for the next 2 years, and I want to thank the city staff, our city leadership team, and the council for really effort, and our community, frankly, for putting robust effort into helping set the course for the next 2 years, and it's an exciting time, so thank you all. Let's move on to item number 8, initial discussion of potential local option levy and or bond. City Manager Wine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This item is on your agenda tonight for an initial discussion. During your goal setting, the goals that you've just adopted include a first goal that states an intention that the city will seek a local option levy and or a bond in the 2020 timeframe. And while your goal setting meeting didn't allow time for a robust discussion about how that levy and or bond would be defined, we knew that it was something that you wanted to discuss and begin to scope now. So I guess in the interest of time too, I'll do the barest minimum of setup and let you know that there are members of our leadership team here tonight, including Mr. LaFrance and Mr. Wyatt, who I think will be available for the discussion along with the other members of our leadership team. What we've brought you tonight is really just an effort to begin to frame the discussion for you so that you can provide us with some guidance and direction about or come to consensus. I would say this too, during your goal setting meeting, I did not hear council consensus about the direction of what the scope of the levy should be. And I think that you have some ideas about how and when and with whom you will want to communicate about the measure. And then I think what we've tried to do from a staff perspective is offer you some ideas about a work plan about how to guide the work of taking a levy measure to voters that would take us through May of 2020. And what we're interested in hearing from you is what information the council needs and your decision path to be able to get to a point, even if you're working back from referral, there's frankly a whole year's worth of work to scope a levy and then figure out how to take it out to voters. And even though I'm mentioning local option levy, one of the things that we have talked about in the aftermath of the 2018 levy is that if there is a focus on police and public safety in an upcoming levy, the council might want to consider addressing both the operational needs as it relates to police, and then also consider whether a police facility should also be either requested of voters, or that we should be seeking investment in a facility at that time. So you have lots of sort of questions to answer and things to discuss. And what you have in your agenda item summary is what we've attached is the beginning points of what a communication plan could look like, and also a work plan. And I hesitate to go through it. We can have it up on the screen if you want to use it as a point of reference to speak to it. So you heard some of the staff recommendation at your council goal setting meeting that we believe that there's 9 to 12 months of work to identify what should be in a levy, and that includes maybe engaging the levy and bond task force, getting advice from the community about what they would like to see in a proposed levy, and basically defining the proposal. And that the more specific a proposal that can be defined as early as possible, we would be addressing some of the feedback we heard from 2018, which was some of our community members and voters thought that the proposal that we put out in 2018 was not well defined enough, or that it was not clear to the community what they would get from that proposal. So we're trying to correct for that and say, let's define the proposal as early as we can up front. And then I think some guidance from you would be useful about what kind and type of communication have with the community. We've made some suggestions through this work plan that we've brought you tonight. And then another, I guess, point of learning from the 2018 levy was that once we refer a measure to voters, the city has to be neutral and factual about what it communicates. And so the more time the city and you have to communicate about the measure pre-referral, the more we can say to the community about what that measure could deliver. I think I probably will stop there and send the issue to you all to discuss, because I think you have, I think the way we're framing this question is that the early guidance that from a staff perspective we need would be, what would you like to see in a future levy and or a bond? And then what, how, when, and with whom would you like to communicate that measure? And how do you see your decision path about reaching a levy going forward in terms of the steps?
Okay, Council President Goodhouse.
I think we were doing the council goals. We wanted just to get the levy discussion going, but we did kind of float around the idea of safety. I would like to see it be a safety levy and a bond for a new police facility is what I'd like to see on upcoming, and I'd like to see us come up with a decision soon based off what we've had already from a lot of the research and the data we have. I'd like to have, my opinion, I'd like to have staff come back with an option of a couple different options for levy amounts that we could go with and what we could get for those amounts, and then also come back for an option of what we could do for a bond and what that would look like. So come back a couple options, but I think that we use the information we've already done before from the previous levy, and then we spend the rest of the time to kind of do an outreach. And if it happens along the way where we have to tweak it a little bit, we tweak it. But I think we settle on something pretty quickly as far as what it's going to look like, what it's going to be, and then spend a lot of time getting out there, going back through that process of why we need it, why we're in that situation, and really just focusing on one set solid number where it's that way it doesn't change.
Others? I've already said my piece before, so I don't know that I need to repeat it. Councilor Anderson?
Okay, so I agree. I agree probably a public safety with a focus on police, and the police station is in badly need of not of a renovation, but of a scrape off and a whole new building. So I would be in favor for some options coming back to us. I think we kind of have a ballpark number for what a police station would cost. The more specific we could get, and this would be probably coming from the chief, would be what we need as far as number of police officers. Pretty much the more specific we can get, I think the people like to know what they're voting on. So that's my only point.
Councilor Loop?
My question would also be, I've heard from citizens lately a lot of concerns regarding streets and sidewalks and those things. And if we're focusing on safety, would any improvements to the backlog that we do have be in consideration to be included in that? Or is it specifically public safety regarding the police department?
To respond to that, the first levy we did, because you're hitting on a point that I've done for a while, was when I first came on council, I had a sidewalk gap program looked at to look at the sidewalks, and I think that's the number one. I think that's a huge safety factor, is having people eyes on streets, people walking around, and that's something that we try to put into the first levy, and I think that muddied it. I don't know if it's something a simple public safety as far as with police, and then we look at a year or two down the road of doing just a sidewalk bond. I always had imagined to do a sidewalk bond and first take care of the police and the police building, and then let's look at a couple years down the road of doing a sidewalk gap bond that would take care of safe routes to schools, trails, sidewalks, and all those issues. I'd love to see it on this one, but I think it might muddy the waters. But I do agree that it's a public safety factor to have sidewalks in there and walkable communities.
And Councilor Loop, just to kind of add a little more clarification or detail around that, is we actually had it at Councilor Goodhouse's lead, staff do this gap analysis, and in rough numbers, we've got about $100 million worth of sidewalk gaps, just to kind of put it in perspective in the inventory. I mean, you could argue it's 80 or 120 million or somewhere in between, but I'm going to round it to 100 for you, if that's helpful.
No, I'm aware of what it cost.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think, this is something that we're going to necessarily fix in one fell swoop.
Right.
But I think there's definitely, concern out there of how do we begin to tackle this problem as well. And
so maybe we could
look at some options. Yes, I would appreciate being able to look at some different options on how that could also be addressed in a public safety area. Especially with our goal of enhancing walkability, and the ADA transition plan that's going to come out is going to be pretty substantial. And how do we continue to address those concerns for all members of our community? I think that's an important part of it. And I'd like to see that as a potential option.
And that did get, I think, from our polling and just from my talking, that's gotten huge support where people will say, yeah, I'll pay what it takes to get sidewalks and so forth. So that does have a huge support system behind it.
I do think there's something for the simple communication about what we're trying to move forward. Councilor Newton?
Yeah, I would support some options definitely around the police services and also the building. I think we need to go out starting tomorrow, pretty immediately. I think it's going to be important to, at the same time we're shopping, I see it as kind of shopping some options with people. At the same time, we're talking to them about what services pay for. Because in a perfect world, do we take all of police, what it costs, and the building, and move it off of the general fund? But, what's that going to cost? That might be quite expensive. So are we going to be funding part of it, and what does that look like? So I think having some options that show how we would fund public safety with a levy and a bond is important. And there may be 2 or 3 kind of choices because of what we would be looking at for cost. I also think we're going to get some questions as we go out and talk to folks about, not about general fund services, about, well, what about the money we already give you? So I think we need to be prepared to talk about the importance of a level of park maintenance, library services, whatever it is we decide, because if we're going to shift too much money keep police services funded with our current general fund, we're not going to be able to really cover everything to the degree that we would hope. So I'd like to see us prepared to have a real discussion about the importance of funding those things, to a reasonable level, and not having this sort of, we're worried about having to cut park maintenance all the time. I'm sort of rambling, but I think we might get into those nuanced discussions with folks. And so I'd like to see something that really targets police services in the building and some options about the level of that goes off of general fund onto a levy. Does that make sense?
Were you also willing to consider in the discussions about what should be included? You didn't really make a comment about the street and sidewalk ideas from Councilor
Well,
Lube. Would
yeah,
you
I think
want
that's
that
fine.
included
I think that's fine. I
in
think
the
we need to,
discussion?
yeah, if that could be an option as well. I do think, to Councilor Anderson's point, what I heard from people when I was out talking was the more specific we can be, the better. So if we talk about, I don't know, response time or number of officers we need, or I don't want to put words in the chief's mouth, but what am I buying for this? And I think that would gain a lot more support.
Okay. Council President Goodhouse?
I was just gonna, to simplify enough, we're trying to get clear direction. I would say, and I don't know who else wants to, but I would say just to stick on police and then police station, even though it hurts me to say hold off on the sidewalks and all that part.
I
But
never
to keep
thought
it-
I'd hear you say that.
But to keep it simple and keep this focused on just clearly, and we can look at the options and see, but I wonder if we start muddying the waters again too much, where we've heard before, we can throw one of the options in there, but if we look at more of the options being police and the building, and throw one of the options in there with the sidewalks or safety in that aspect, but more of the focus on police and police station.
Mr.
Counsel-
Mayor? Oh,
Yes. Oh,
may
go
I-
ahead, City Manager Warren.
I'd just like to make I guess this is a framing comment, and because after listening to Councilor Newton's comment, I don't want to spend a lot of time reliving 2018, but I think, and maybe Mr. LaFrance can help me with this. When the city went out for a levy last time, we asked voters for $1.18 per thousand, and that size of a levy would raise roughly $8 million. And so in terms of scoping a levy, I don't think there's any presumption that a levy that we would go out for would be intended to fund the police department or to fund existing services in the police department, but it would be about enhancing or ensuring, for example, that our patrol districts are fully staffed, that the levy would fund. So what I would suggest is, we also learned in the 2018 levy that that it is confusing to talk about having a levy fund something that we're already doing. And so I think that if we bring you back options, it'll be about services that are, that supplement or enhance or ensure are at an adequate level in the police department, and there wouldn't be any presumption that it would fund the whole police department. Because I think we also heard that $1.18 was more than some voters were willing to pay for, vote for, and so maybe a levy that is smaller than the $1.18 that we asked for in the last round would, but I'm reminding you about how much that amount raised, and then we can come back with options about, given what that raised, what that might be able to fund.
And I guess what I was saying was, I heard out there, was that possible? I don't think it's possible. I'm just thinking in terms of as we go out, we need to clearly understand that isn't something that we would be looking to do. So, and if there's concerns we have about maintaining financial support for some of our other services, we need to be prepared to talk about that too. So I don't think it's realistic to think that we could do that, but I heard that as a suggestion. So was my point. Okay.
Council, do you have any opinion on the streets and sidewalks piece?
Well, we're going to approach that in the budget, right? We have this big ADA number coming up.
We do have a large ADA number coming up. Also, among your goals and the council goals you just approved is a standard that we will be spending for pedestrian facilities, ped bike facilities, at least 10% of the city's transportation capital improvement plan will be used for ped bike facilities. So that would be sidewalks, bike lanes, trails, that kind of thing. So you've set a standard that we will be meeting over the next 2 years.
With that said, I'd say we just keep chipping away at it like we are and focus more on the police.
Okay, so what you had proposed, or what you had originally said, public safety in the facility?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm hearing more consensus around that. And so have we answered the first question you've given us direction on? What's included in the levy? Do we feel like?
We're going to take direction to, thank you. We'll take direction to bring back options in the realm of what you're suggesting.
Okay. Public safety, facility, and operations.
Yes.
Okay. Then your second and more complicated question, frankly, is what, how, when on the communication front?
I'll just tee this up with one more sentence. When you discussed this briefly at your council goal setting, what to take to the public in terms of a defined levy package, and whether that, how well defined it is and how you wanted to communicate about it was something that you started a discussion about at your goal setting. But I think we'd like to hear more feedback from you about, I think we're in agreement with council's statements that the sooner we can be out talking about a proposal, the better. The more clearly defined it is, the better. I think the less it changes from the first time we start talking about it, the better. What kind of input and from who you would like to have. So for example, in the work plan that we offered you in tonight's agenda item summary, we're proposing that we engage the Levy and Bond Task Force, they've been on hiatus since 2018, to advise you about basically what the package should look like, or the levy proposal should look like, and make a recommendation to you. And so there might be others that you want to be sure that you engage, and also I guess we'd like to hear from you about what you think about communicating. I know it's a broad question, but it sounded like you had some ideas, so we wanted to collect them.
Council President Goodhouse?
So are you, looking at the timeline, are you proposing that we wouldn't decide until July? Is that what you're kind of?
I heard two lines of thinking at your goal setting process, and one was that I think Councilor Newton said it a moment ago, was that you would go out and listen between March and July or offer options to people and say, what do you think about this, and what services do you think should be included? And then beginning in July, we get public feedback about an initial proposal, and then if that proposal needed to be refined based on public input or community engagement, that between in the September timeframe, the proposal would be finalized.
To me, that just seems, the whole point I think we were trying to do is just come up with something sooner. I think by us right now trying to confine it more into just a safety in a building, I think we want to try to come up with a decision quicker and spend more time on interacting with the public. At least that's what I feel like we need to do. I think if we start looking at the timeline, start getting too far out, then we have that smaller time frame as far as getting the message out there, replying back to it. If we were going to do something more of a complex levy or a complex thing, I think we would look at a longer time frame. But if we're narrowing it down just to something where it's safety, a public police, and then we're looking at a police building, I think we need to do more of an accelerated time frame. We've already kind of looked. We know.
I would point out though that we've already provided, in what we just directed a few minutes ago, we provided more direction and more clear direction than we had provided in 2018, even maybe a month before we referred something to the ballot. So I mean, I understand the sort of the concern and the perspective, but we're already narrowing quickly. And I view these, and maybe City Manager Wine may want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I view these as things that are sort of further narrowing and confirming support for pretty specific details in a proposal, and less about, like, I don't think we're going to be going out and saying to the Bond and Levy Task Force or to other groups, like, do you think public safety is the right thing? Like, I don't think that's the question, right? I mean, at least the way I'm envisioning it. So I feel like this is moving us in that right direction.
So more the scope of, do we want I don't know, just hypothetical numbers, do we want 70 or 80 cents? Do we want 20 or 40 million for a bond? You know, it's kind of narrowing those fields down.
Well,
If
yeah,
we want,
do you care whether,
do we want
some-
8 officers or 6 officers? Do we want this or that?
yeah, and is traffic enforcement a priority over schools, or, I mean, like, those kinds
So,
of.
so if we're still on the topic, we're narrowed down, then that makes more sense.
And I would, to concur with the mayor, I mean, I think if we move up these timelines, if they go faster, great. But to the mayor's point, I think what I see us going out is saying, this is what this levy, this is the services that we're talking about. What do you think about this? And if there's some reaction or tweaking we need to do, or you've left this out, or I would support this, I think that's where we are testing the options. And we may see a lot of support before July, and we may be comfortable moving, narrowing it down sooner. So, although I think that's a good estimate, it may not take that long, may take us a little bit longer. So, but I think we're shopping options, and we're trying to see if people in the community support the services, paying for those services.
I mean, it's really about what the community needs and wants. Councilor Anderson?
I'd say yes to activating the levy and bond task force. I think that input's valuable, but they'll have more of a narrower parameters this time, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel from last 2 years ago.
So if I may, a possible suggestion is you have, I believe, 2 meetings coming up in April. April 23rd and April 9th?
Second.
So we could easily, by April 23rd, come to council with 2 or 3 options that help narrow down what you'd be looking at for a levy, what type of services would be included in that, what would be roughly the size. I can tell you we've been talking about this at the leadership team level for a while now, and we're already kind of zeroing in on what that would look like.
I won't be here that night, so just so you know.
Council President Goodhouse?
I do have so with the levy and the bond task force, are we gonna restart it with the members that were on it before? What's
Well,
the reason I'm asking is that if we have we reached out to them to see if they're all available and still want to do it, and if not,
I think we know some of them probably are interested, and some are either moved, or gone, or I don't know that we've got anyone who's just not interested, but they're.
So my recommendation would be that if that's the plan and we know, can we in the next week or 2 reach out to those and get a confirmation of who's still willing to do it, and if not, we can start the process to interview or get new members. So by the time that's ready, we don't have to say, oops, also we only have.
Yes, and I actually think we need to, and I don't know, I'm open to feedback on this, but I actually think the levy and bond task force was, I don't know if underpowered is the right way to describe it, but we have a lot of really gifted and experienced community leaders, some of whom have been mayors, some of whom have been county commissioners in other parts of Oregon, people that have run lots of campaigns, people that, we had virtually no people in the levy task force, and I think that's a mistake. I think that we should be looking at having, and I don't know if it's the same group, like maybe it's 2 different groups, but I think that, or groups that work together, I don't know, but I think we need to give that group a different level of juice, so to speak.
Do you want to create a new one or add to it?
No, well, we need to either add some additional folks with different types of experience in addition to what we have, or we need to have potentially a couple groups. Like one of them maybe is, former community leaders of some sort. I don't know. I'm open to feedback. I'm just making the observation that I don't know that it was a mistake before. I'm not really sure we thought about it exactly, but in this group, I think we could get a lot of valuable input and feedback and advice on the scoping part of this, and then potentially in the moving forward component of it as well.
I was going to add, I mean, you just made me think I was going to add this anyways, and I mentioned this before during our liaison reports when I was at the National League of Cities. They were talking about community engagement and so forth, that maybe we do a roundtable invitation to community leaders or to actually specific people in different demographics of our community, and do either with council or just do a study session kind of workshop with a invited list of people, so we can kind of hit where we get maybe we get someone from the base community, we get someone from the business community, maybe we get someone that had been prior Tigard government, but we do either we do a conversation with council or we do a conversation where they get together in the room and discuss this. And so maybe we do the Levy and Bond Task Force, and we do a group of people that are community leaders or involved in the community.
Other thoughts?
Yes to all of it and more, I think. I don't know that, I think it might be a good idea to integrate the Bond and Levy Task Force
You do
with
or
those
do not
communities.
think
I do. I think
Okay.
that might be a good idea. I also think, I heard, I can't remember exactly what conference I attended, but there was a city that, sort of the walkabout that we're talking about doing, the doorbelling, one of the opportunities they offered to people was to contact the city if they'd be willing to serve on a one-time kind of focus group thing. And this community, I think it was in Georgia, gathered people for different times the council had questions, and people, it was interesting because people who normally wouldn't participate, that were, low income or seniors who didn't have the kind of time or energy to do something on an ongoing basis, found that very, a good way to engage. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do to get more people front end involved in this. And I would also remind you that that's another thing that the Community Engagement Committee is going to take a look at when we meet on April 17th, is some ideas about outreach for the Bond and Levy communications. So,
Councilor Anderson, did you have comment?
As far as the bond, and this is putting more work on the chief's plate, but I don't think there's anything more convincing than having an open house tour of the current police station. Have it every weekend if they could get as many people through that, because it sells itself. So, plus I think that as far as leaning on the police leadership in several events that we might have, that we could coordinate with them and have an outreach there.
Okay. Council President Goodhouse?
Councilor Lube and I went to, was it last week, there was a community conversation on equity in the Triangle, and it was, had to be about 50 plus people there, and there was broken into the tables, and there was a moderator that oversaw it. And if we could maybe do something like that where, maybe rather than doing the Levy and Bond Task Force, maybe we have one or two nights like that where the community members
Like
come
a
together.
community conversation?
Conversation.
yeah.
So this one,
Good.
because they broke into the tables, and each table had an easel with the white paper on it, and the immediate moderator talked about what it was and kind of narrowed it down, and you kind of walk through the steps and saying, what do you want to see? What do you want to accomplish from this? What do you think it needs to be to get this? And so if we were to have something where we had one or two of those, either at the library or if we had a huge turnout, at high school or somewhere where we even had 50, 100 people, that'd be a great way to really, the community, whether, anyone came, really have their thoughts into it, and that would help really narrow down to really actively walk through a process for a couple hours to see what it looked like.
I don't know that that's the most effective way to get the current and past community leaders, but I do like the idea of that potentially even in lieu of the Bond and Levy Task
That's more I was thinking. I think still do the prior community leaders as a separate roundtable, but let's maybe replace the Bond and Levy Task Force with a community event like we did with the Triangle.
But all of the former members or current members could come to them.
Yeah.
They could be invited or not.
I just wonder if I would be interested, as somebody who was not really here when the levy was being considered. I'd be interested to know, though, the Bond and the Levy Task Force, some of those people worked out on that campaign, And I'm not sure that I wouldn't support 1 or 2 meetings with that group to talk with them about the last levy, what we're proposing this time, and give them an opportunity to weigh in. So I just throw that out there. I support the other idea, doing the big, community conversation, but then I'm going to support everything going out, starting tomorrow.
If we're talking to people, you're in.
Yes, I'm in. Knocking on
Councilor
doors, I'm
Lube.
in.
I like the idea of having a levy and bond task force. I also support diversifying it with a variety of different people with different experiences. I think only good things can come from that. And I think it would be important to designate a certain amount of responsibility to that task force in regards to messaging and planning. And from then, each of them could take control over different areas of outreach. And we could do things that start at that task force level and then go ahead and are broadened out. Again, to have different kinds of meetings to meet people where they are, because not everybody can attend a community event on a Thursday night. So maybe, that's charged with part of the task force, and part of the task force does other kinds of events. But I think it's important to have a central group that can put together a cohesive message that's direct. So it's planned out and well done with a variety of different community members with different experience.
And again, I would remind that that's something that the Community Engagement Committee is going to be looking at too, as the messaging. So,
City Manager Wine, how are we doing at the what, how, and when communication?
I appreciate all of the ideas that you've suggested, and if you will, so Mr. Wyatt produced a draft and initial community engagement plan, and if we can take what you've offered here, and I'm not hearing that there are major changes as it relates to the timeline about when you would communicate. You've got some ideas about how to communicate them. We can incorporate them into the plan that you have and come up with a way forward and bring that to you at the next meeting with a more refined suggestion.
Council President Goodhouse.
The biggest thing I want to reiterate, and I've said this many times, is that with our social media, when we do these campaigns or we do outreach, that our biggest thing we got to do is we make sure that we follow up with comments or responses and so forth. That's the biggest thing I see. A lot of times something happens, or
by campaign you mean the educational campaign that the city might.
Yeah, educational, and this, or any matter that happens, when something's thrown out, we're talking about a topic or something like that, and someone replies, that we're on top of it, we get a response back to them. A lot of times I see a response not get responded to, and then people think, well, hey, why is the city wanting to ask my opinion but never coming back on it? So that's the number one, I think. If we put the time and effort into it, we got to put just as much effort in to responding to every single person's comment. Even if it's, hey, hold on for a couple of days, we'll get back to you. But still post that so everyone can see it. That's going to be the most crucial spot. If you go unknown, then people start wandering, their minds start unknown, or think, oh, they don't really want to know my opinion. So I just want to say that because we have a whole plan outlaid, but if we don't do that last part, then it's pointless.
Do you feel like you've got enough?
I think we have enough guidance to keep going and bring you back a more refined communications plan.
Okay. That concludes our initial discussion of the potential local option levy and/or bond. We have no non-agenda items. We do not have an executive session. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.